Chapter 4, More Contingency Theories. The presentation of Fielder's contingency model in the 1960s created considerable controversy, but it also provided leadership researchers with a new, more productive approach to the problem. A second generation of contingency theories followed the contingency model and reflected a variety of perspectives. The two most prominent of the second generation contingency theories were House's 1971 Path-Goal Theory of Supervision and Vroom and Yenton's 1973 Normative Decision Theory. This chapter deals extensively with these two models, as well with some related theories that did not have as great an impact on the research literature, but nonetheless offer valuable insights. The Path-Goal Theory of Leadership. One of the weaknesses of Fielder's contingency model was that, discussed in last chapter, was its failure to describe or directly analyze the processes by which the leader's motivational orientation affects groups' processes and outcomes. One obvious path for the leadership effects to follow is through the psychological states of the followers, the people who must aid the leader in accomplishing the mission. Following this logic, leadership can be construed in terms of its effects on the motivation and satisfaction of followers. Many motivational theories of the time were influenced by instrumentality notions that conceptualized motivation in terms of an actor's perception of the likelihood that certain behaviors would result in, i.e., be instrumental for, gaining desired outcomes. Grigoriopoulos, Mahoney, and Jones, 1957, authored a path-goal instrumentality model that argued that motivation to engage in a behavior was a function of the product of the person's perception of the probability that the behavior would lead to a goal and the perceived importance of this goal. A natural question concerns what sorts of factors influence an actor's perceptions of the path-goal probabilities. In particular, how might a leader's actions influence the path-goal perceptions held by subordinates? The path-goal approach has the virtue of identifying the specific variables that must be addressed in defining follower motivation. Evans, 1970, hypothesized that these path-goal perceptions were the moderators of the effects of leaders' behaviors, such as the initiation of structure and consideration. He reasoned that the behaviors did not always have the same effects on group outcomes, such as productivity or satisfaction, because they did not always have the same effects on path-goal perceptions. Evans argued that considerate and participative supervision enhanced the subordinates' perceptions of the availability of goals associated with higher-order needs, i.e., self-esteem, feelings of accomplishment, but did nothing to make the subordinate feel more certain about how to go about attaining those goals. Initiation of structure, on the other hand, provided clarification of the appropriate path, e.g., high productivity, high quality, obedience, although not necessarily assuring the availability of rewards. Thus, in conjunction, the two behaviors should have the most positive effect. Structuring leader behavior should have a very positive effect on motivation when consideration levels are high, but no effect when consideration behavior is absent. Evans, 1970, collected data from samples of workers in a public utility company, from nurses, and in a general hospital. Respondents rated the considerate and structuring behaviors of their supervisors and their own perceptions of availability and importance of goals, e.g., promotion, pay, the instrumentality of various paths to those goals, e.g., helping others, producing high quality of output, the frequencies with which they followed those paths, and their job satisfaction. The results provided moderate support for the hypotheses. Both leader behaviors, consideration, and structuring were found to be significantly related to perceptions of path-goal instrumentality. But the predicted interaction of behaviors was not found. The product of path-goal instrumentality and goal importance, i.e., how likely it was that the path would lead to a goal and how important that goal was, predicted the frequency with which workers reported engaging in various paths. Finally, a leader's considerate behavior was related to worker satisfaction. The results suggested that Evans might be on the right track. Followers' psychological states were indeed related to their perceptions of leaders' behavior, even if not exactly in the way that the theory predicted. In 1971, Robert House offered an alternative Path-Goal Theory of Leadership that integrated situational variables as moderators of the effects of leader behavior, thus making his model a true contingency theory. House argued that Evans's approach neglected the characteristics of the followers and followers' tasks. These situational variables should determine when and how the supervisor's behavior affects the motivation, performance, and satisfaction of the followers. Like Evans, House argued that the motivational functions of the leader is to increase followers' perceptions of rewards for performance and to make the path to these rewards easier for the follower to travel by clarifying the appropriate behavior and criteria of the performance by removing roadblocks or barriers. In specification of the situational variables, House, 1971, included the follower's ability and personality, e.g., locus of control, authoritarianism, and environmental factors, including the task of the formal authority system and the nature of the primary work group, e.g., task interdependence. In reviewing the extant literature on behavior effects, House, 1971, illustrated how conflicting findings might be reconciled by reference to the role that these situational variables play as moderators. For example, when group members work on highly interdependent tasks, consideration behavior might increase productivity by establishing a climate in which cooperation is maintained, or when a follower's level of authoritarianism is high, supervisory structuring behavior is more positively received than when the follower is less authoritarian. Although the theoretical specification of situational variables was quite extensive, including both environmental and follower characteristics, a much more limited set of situational moderators was actually employed in subsequent research on the model. Follower personality and ability factors were relatively ignored, and attention was focused on the nature of the follower's task, in particular, the extent to which the job was intrinsically interesting and fulfilling versus boring and assertive, and the extent to which the job duties were ambiguous and broad in scope versus highly structured and predictable. The degree of structure in a task and the extent to which it is interesting and fulfilling are not conceptually identical, but they are related in practice. Tasks with greater scope, both in terms of complexity and autonomy, tend to have a higher potential for intrinsic motivation and interest. The theory hypothesized that when task structure is low, subordinates will respond positively to a leader's structuring behavior, which helps to clarify the task and the path to the goal. When the task is already structured, leaders' structuring behavior will be seen as redundant and interpreted as overly close monitoring or heavy-handed production emphasis. Consideration behavior will have its most positive effects when the task is boring, aversive, or unfulfilling, typically when structure is high. When the task is intrinsically interesting, consideration behavior is irrelevant and should have no relationship to either subordinate motivation or satisfaction. Many path-goal theory studies address the degree of ambiguity in the subordinate's job, operationalized either by subordinate ratings of task structure, by role ambiguity, or by task variety ambiguity from formal structural variables such as administrative level, group size, and organizational size. Most of this research provides for the model, some of it strong. In studies that failed to confirm the hypotheses, it was usually the case that consideration behavior was positively related to the satisfaction regardless of the degree of ambiguity in the task or job, whereas the initiation of structure effects were confusing and difficult to interpret. A comprehensive meta-analysis of Path-Goal Theory research by Invik indicated moderate but mixed support for its major propositions. Explanations of Path-Goal Theory's mixed findings focus on two sets of issues. The first of these is methodological and reflects concern about the operational of the model's constructs. As early as 1970s, Evans 1970, acknowledged a methodological fly in the ointment that would continuously call into question the validity of findings with path-goal studies. The problem was that all the measures of significant variables in the model, i.e., leader behavior, subordinate perceptions of instrumentality and satisfaction, were provided by the same person. Thus, the finding that consideration behavior is correlated with followers' satisfaction could mean that, indeed, leaders who are considerate make their subordinates more satisfied, or it may simply mean that when subordinates are satisfied, they perceive that their leader is being considerate. It is dangerous to equate perceptions of leader behavior with actual behavior. The problem is made especially problematic by the natural tendency for people to maintain consistency in their thoughts and attitudes. For example, the behaviors included in the consideration factor are generally positive, such as being friendly, considerate, and supportive. It is natural that subordinates who are satisfied with their leader will attribute those positive valence behaviors to him or her. A related problem is that the variables that are distant from one another in theory may not be so easily separable in practice. The leader behavior factors may be correlated with each other. For example, a subordinate's ratings of how ambiguous a task is might already include the subordinate's assessment of the effects of the supervisor's attempt at structuring the task. In such cases, the leader's behavior and the conditions in which the behavior is manifested are confounded with each other. By equating perceptions of behavior with actual behavior and by not taking into account halo effects, single source methodologies may muddle attempts at causal explanation. A second concern with path-goal theory is that the relative neglect of subordinate characteristics in the research. For example, considerable research indicated that personality characteristics like subordinate authoritarianism affect reactions to leader behavior under a variety of conditions. Within the path-goal body of work, a study by Griffith, 1981, suggests that the powerful role played by the subordinate personality. Griffith's study indicated a measure of the growth needs strength of the respondents. Growth needs strength assesses an individual's desire for a job that allows for learning, personal growth, and autonomy. Griffin compared the reactions to leader directive, participative and supportive behavior by subordinates high and low in growth needs strength, who held challenging or routine jobs. He found that subordinates in high growth need strength responded positively to supportive behavior when their task was boring, but reacted negatively to directive behavior even when the task is challenging. For subordinates in low growth need strength, the pattern was different. These workers did not show an especially positive response to supportive behavior when their task was routine because, we might assume, a routine task was not aversive, and they responded quite positively to leader direction under all conditions. Griffin's results point to the danger of neglecting follower personalities and needs in any analysis of the effects of leader behavior. In recent years, research on path-goal theory has waned. The body of evidence has been amassed, however, suggests that its major tenets are probably on target. The actions taken by leaders can have powerful effect on subordinates' motivation and satisfaction. In most cases, leader behaviors that supply subordinates with needed information or desired support will be most effective, and those subordinates' needs and desires will be influenced by personal and environmental considerations. A comprehensive theory of leadership must integrate the path-goal principles.